we believe that the concept of bringing value to the customer and having that still hitting all the boxes where the service is great, having, high quality food, I think there's a lot more to grow, and we want to make it into something that's beyond just West Hollywood. We really want to grow our footprint all to LA, and we want to really make a difference on what people see as a fast casual concept. From a staffing standpoint, I feel like company culture, restaurants have such a bad rep of company culture, and I think it sucks because, you hear it so many times. People leave the service industry because it's a grind. And we're really, really trying to change that. And I feel like everybody's going towards that direction.
This episode made possible by Restaurant Systems Pro. With excitement, allow me to introduce to you today's guest, co-owner of Dialog Cafe, Tadeh Ghazalian. Todd, my man, are you feeling unstoppable today?
I feel amazing.
Dude,
I'm excited.
Psyched to have you here. You're here because Andrew Simmons calls you out, and obviously because you and your family has built an amazing business over the past, what is it now, since 2007? We're looking at like 15 years or something like that, more?
Great run. That's about right.
Man, that's awesome, dude. I can't wait to dive into who you are and how you got to where you are today. But let's get that motivational, inspirational ball rolling with the success quarter mantra. What do you got for us?
I always go with one that's great with my team, and it's good ideas and better ideas. Simple, and it's really done so well. There's no bad ideas. And for us, it's you have good ideas, and if people have better ideas, let's go for it. And if you don't, then we're going to go with what people say, because I feel like things evolve and things change so quickly that you have to be open, and there is no, it's very easy to shoot something down. Right. But it's a lot harder to come out with something better.
As I'm listening to you talk, what's going through my mind is this idea of just removing the ego, and opening up the dialogue to let other people contribute and to get out of the way. Dialogue.
I love it.
I didn't even think about that. Pun not intended. But is that why you're laughing? Because I said dialogue?
Yeah.
Okay. What's going through your mind?
I think it's really, and you're completely right. I think in our industry, there's a lot of egos, a lot of, there's so many obstacles all the time, and everybody's trying to, we can't do that. That's not possible. But it's so easy for people to shoot things down, but it's so much more challenging to push the limit of what we can do. And I think dialogue that's exactly, everybody's like, oh, you can't do lunch out of this. This place is too small. You can't have this much volume. We can't push. We can't motivate it. The culture here can't change. You can't, motivate people to be, career oriented at Dialog. And unless you go forward and you just keep trucking away and pushing these better ideas, you can never get past that. Yeah. And I think people forget so quickly.
Yeah. Get comfortable being uncomfortable, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So before we dive into how you got to where you are today and where you are today, really just list your portfolio. What is your business and what are your businesses today? I want to make sure everything's on the table.
Yeah. So
without getting into any detail.
Yeah. And when you mean businesses as in
so you got Dialog.
Yep.
Right? Dialog Cafe.
Yep.
You're opening a second and third location.
Yep.
Are there any other ghost kitchens? Are there other restaurants that I might not be aware of? Any other businesses that you think we should be aware of in terms of thinking things you can speak to help us be better versions of ourselves?
So I'm a believer you double down on things that work.
Yep.
And Dialog Cafe from day one was something that I assist with, and every time, the more time I put into it, the more it grew. So this is the one and only now. The OG. Yeah. And then we're calling it Dialog Clubhouse, which is our expansion, and that is going to be the relationship that we have on location number 2 and number 3.
Got it. And where are those they're about to open, right?
So we have West LA.
Yeah.
That's going to be, the goal is September, October. Right now we're in full bare bones demolition.
We'll get into it. And then where's the club? Is that What's Hollywood?
Yeah, so West LA is going to be number 2.
Okay.
And then Beverly Hills is number 3. And that one's still in permitting processes.
Got it. Cool.
But the goal is by the mid next year, there'll be 3 dialogues
Sweet.
operational.
All right. Now take us back to the beginning. Where does it make sense to start sharing your story?
While I was still in college.
Okay.
Actually, we can even take it further back, all the way when I lived in Canada.
Okay.
So, my family's been entrepreneurship was always part of our family.
Got it.
My grandfather owned a hotel back in the day, and he was.
Where in Canada were you?
We lived in Ottawa, Ontario.
Okay.
Very, at the time was very small, but entrepreneurship and growing and building things has always been part of our family. And my brother in Canada, he was actually a franchisee. He won like Entrepreneur of the Year in Canada. Cool. He had like an in-cartridge refill concept franchise model.
Nice.
And my brother was really successful there. My dad had an electronic repair business, and I was the younger son who kind of assisted. And my brother wanted to come to LA, and told me about USC and having this whole business program and accounting. And I said, okay, let's go for it.
What's the age difference between you and your brother?
9.5 years.
Okay, and he's older, I'm assuming?
Yeah.
Got it.
9.5 years, much older, a little bit more seasoned with experience of.
I read somewhere online that your family comes from Rome and that you're Italian.
So I was born in Rome.
Okay.
And my brother grew up there as a kid.
Got it.
But the only one who really spoke Italian was my dad.
Okay, got it.
But that Italian culture, very instilled in the way we ran the house. My mom makes an amazing lasagna, makes amazing pasta, desserts, and my dad. I was a kid when my dad started giving me espresso.
Okay, I love that. So you guys are in Canada. Your brother catches this entrepreneurial bug. He starts planting the seed in the family head, California.
Yep.
When does your brother come out here?
So he would come visit. My brother and I would always come during summer. We had family here, and it's very contagious. There's so many. This place is beautiful. The weather's amazing, and there's so many opportunities. Canada was very different for us. I went to like a very small private school. A private school back in Canada is very different than private school here, but it was very limited, and my brother had this huge franchise concept with I think it was 12 or 13 locations, and he really pushed it and scaled it as much as possible, but he knew, and my dad was supportive of it, to kind of continue growing. And my brother actually fell in love with a girl in LA.
Yeah, that'll do it, man.
So he fell in love, and he's like, hey, you're moving to LA. We're going. I was like, what?
So was your brother's was his franchise in Los Angeles?
No, his franchise was in Ottawa.
Okay.
That's how it started.
Okay.
And so he came out for love. I came out here for school, and I literally came out here for school at the beginning of my senior year, and I came in and I was like, oh my God, this is so different. And we were game planning on what this was. I wanted to come here for school, and quickly after, my brother's like, okay, well, I'm gonna pursue this love, and I'm gonna see.
Are they still together?
Yeah, they're
good.
They're married. Good. They're married with 3 kids.
Awesome. I was gonna say, if they weren't together anymore,
but a beautiful story.
That's a good story. Yeah.
Oh my God. And 3 crazy kids, by the way. 3 boys, insane.
It's all that espresso.
Yeah.
So he comes out here. He pulls the family with him. What year did you guys get here? In 2006, I'm assuming.
Yep.
Okay.
So 2006, I start my senior year, and my parents are like, hey, my dad was about to retire. He's like, he had 1 or 2 properties. He's worked, he sold the business, and he was about to retire.
And you said your grandfather had a hotel.
Yeah,
right?
back in the day.
In Rome.
No, this was actually so we are Armenian.
Okay. I was gonna say Ghazalian. I don't know. Ghazalian is not Italian.
No, it's we are pure Armenian blood.
Okay, got it.
But there's a whole backstory of the history of Armenia and what happened, and you know, he had his hotel. My dad actually worked in that hotel, and he had a whole bunch of kids. So it's always been in the family, that hospitality kind of ingrained in us. But then when we came out, my dad's like, hey, I'm not going to live in Canada. It's super cold. It snows. It's just, we had no family there. It was my mom and dad. And they're like, hey, we're going to come out to LA. And that's where Canada, there was like a visa at the time called the E2 visa, where if you invest a certain amount of money into the US and you have, you're able to sustain payroll and provide jobs, then they would allow you to have a green card. And they can apply, you would have the visa and you can apply for a green card. And that was how Dialog kind of stemmed. At the time, it was called Dialog Coffee and Bakery. It was really known for, quick little items, but they had computers. Okay. It was like a cyber cafe, which kind of related to my dad because that's how it was in Europe and Italy. There was all these computers, and they.
So the computers were basically just like owned by the cafe, and people could come in and use it.
And people would pay money to use it.
Okay.
And there was a little gelato stand right at the beginning of where the entrance of Dialog was.
Okay.
And my dad, my brother, and I, we would hand make the gelato, and we would bring a lot of our ingredients sourced from Italy. We used to bring like pistachios from Sicily and make it into gelato.
Okay. So you met, and if you mentioned this and I missed it, I apologize. But your dad, so he was about to retire. You said he had properties. Was he like? Yeah. What was his line of work?
So he, my dad was all into electronic repair. My dad knew how, to repair pretty much phones, TVs, and that was his background. And at the time, he started at a very small little 200 square foot little repair shop. And over the years, he bought his first building and moved his repair shop in it, worked it, paid it off. And then at that point, he's like, hey, you know what? Kids are going to do their own thing. We weren't going to go into electronics. And he just had somebody renting from him.
Right. And I'm thinking about the world of electronics today. I feel like people don't keep electronics. It's like if it's a year or two old, it's time to get the next thing.
Yep. And that's what happened.
Yeah.
All of that kind of disappeared so quickly. And, people used to pay $150, $200 to fix their phone.
Right.
And this was, TVs were, they were so large you couldn't even get it out of the house.
Right.
And my dad would do service calls with my brother, and they would install these sound systems, and, everything, China swiped that away so quickly, and everything became, a lot more affordable, and there was the TVs, plasmas, LCD, and it really evolved, and, that repair business kind of went out. And my dad's like, okay, well, maybe that's it. We have the property. And
so he had assets that he could sell and liquidate. Is that part of how you guys were able to get this location on just off Sunset Boulevard, right? West Hollywood, 2006. This couldn't have been a cheap place. Do you own the building? Did you own the building then?
No. So we have amazing, long, great relationships with our landlords here.
Okay, cool.
But we've always rented, but they bought the business. My dad actually sold everything he had to buy this business, and this was one that he was kind of...
Was the business pre-existing? Like, was it a cafe before your parents bought it?
It was like a coffee shop. Okay. It was. I wouldn't call it a cafe because it didn't have any...
No food.
Like having food was such a great thing because it wasn't like...
Was it like wholesale food, like packaged, like snacks and stuff like that?
It was definitely like packaged. I remember we we used to sell Costco muffins.
Okay. Yeah.
But at the time that was and West Hollywood, at that time was so different to what it is today. And, my parents got it right before the recession, and they took everything and they bought this business right before. And on paper, it looked like it was doing okay. And quickly after they sold everything, bought Dialog, this thing, the economy
2008. Yeah, it was a hard time.
It nose plunge, and my parents realized that they actually had to work.
Right. So was it a dream for your parents to own a cafe? Or like why a cafe? Like what was it about this opportunity that resonated with them?
So it was never, I give it to my parents. They were able to adapt so many times. My dad, my dad lived in Iran at a time, and he moved to Italy, and from Italy he moved to Canada. In Canada, he came to the U.S. He literally took his family to 4 different countries.
That's wild.
So, talking about being able to maneuver and just be flexible.
So you were born in Canada?
I was born in Italy.
Oh, you were born in Italy.
I was built.
Your brother was little when he came over.
Yeah. So
you have Italian nationality.
How
does that work?
So we were more. I think it was more of the culture than the nationality itself.
Okay. Well, it's interesting because I think this idea of nationalities, I think, is going to be such a thing of the past. It's going to be when you can be on the other side of the world in a day. Like it's not going to take long for the old way to be forgotten of like this like national pride.
I think it's changed. And people ask me like, "What are you?" It's like, I don't know. Up to 3 years ago, I was a Canadian citizen, and it was funny. And my dad and people were like, "Oh, where are you from?" My dad's like, "Oh, I'm a Canadian," and I was like, "Dad, really?" And he goes, "What do you mean? I was a citizen there." And it's like, "Oh, you have a dad." There's so many things. Okay, well, you speak Italian, so are you Italian? Are you know?
Well, it's normal in like North America that we're just like this melting pot of different cultures, right? But if you go back east, to like Europe and Asia and like there's like history there, but we're starting to realize like all these lines are being blurred, but there's still this idea of like nations. And I just, not to get too far off subject, I'm like it's just so antiquated. It's just like, when are we going to think more globally, and when are we going to look beyond these invisible lines in the sand?
I agree.
It's just,
and I feel like everybody's part of like 2 different cultures.
Right.
And I speak French because I lived in Canada. I went to a school that spoke half in French, but it's like, how does that work? But I feel like these days it's like whatever influences you the most is where you resonate closest to. I am Armenian, but I didn't learn the Armenian language until I met my wife.
Interesting.
So I was like, and when I moved out here and I went to my senior year, I ended up in Glendale with all the Armenians, and they're like, "Are you Armenian?" And it's like, "Yeah." It's like, "Do you speak Armenian?" I was like, "I don't speak." Like I don't know anything. And
worst Armenian ever.
And it's like, and it was even when I met my wife's dad. He's like, "Okay, cool. You're Armenian. You're Tadeh." And I was like, "Yes." He goes, so he started speaking Armenian. And I was like, I don't. He goes, "How is this possible?" And I was like, "This is kind of Rome. Grew up
moved to Canada.
Yeah. So it's like I speak French. I understand Italian. And
yeah.
He's like, "But no Armenian." And I was like,
"That's funny."
So there's a lot of cultures in there.
We got to bring this back to restaurants as much as I'm loving the conversation. So 2006, you're in school. What's the vision for yourself? What's your dream in 2006, 2007 when you're going to college?
I knew I was gonna fall in love with business. I've always been. I love the concept of building. I was very like systemized in the way things work and how to make things efficient. That was always my. That's what I really, really loved. But, going back, I'm so fortunate that I have a brother who was extremely successful and a dad that really worked and learned everything the hard way of how a business operates. And, we have family members who have coffee shops, and one thing that I feel like is so like that operators miss is the financial and the accounting component in a business. And, and still to these days, I have friends, amazing chefs, some of the most talented chefs. And I'll go and I'll see them and, and I'll see something in their like pastry case. And I'm like, $22 for a pie?
Yeah.
And you're just like, what's your cost on that? Like, that sounds kind of, aren't you getting the apples from the farmer's market?
Yeah.
And they're, yeah, but what do you think? You think it's too expensive? I was like, well,
what does it cost?
What does it cost? And,
Yeah.
and it's like, I don't know. Like,
what's your labor? Okay, what do you need to charge to make a 15% profit or a 10% profit?
And you're asking, and they're like, I don't know, maybe like $7. And like, wait, are you sure?
Yeah.
And it's so going back, it's being the accounting kind of gives you the financial like background and the backbone of it. And at the time when we moved out here, so my parents had the visas, and my brother had his own game plan. He was in love. He was going back and forth between Canada. Didn't really need any, visa or anything like that.
So he's in his late 20s at this point in his life. If he's like 10 years older, 9 years older than you, you're in high school, I'm assuming. Okay. So,
what up, Unstoppable restaurant owners and operators? We have to interrupt today's video to let you know that Restaurant Unstoppable and Restaurant Systems Pro, we're taking our relationship to the next level. Beginning in July of 2024, Fred Langley, CEO of Restaurant Systems Pro, is making himself available once a week in Restaurant Unstoppable Network to answer all of your restaurant systems questions, whether it's the profit margins. He will look at your P&L. Bring your P&L. He will take a look at that. He will dissect it. He will help you find your profit, whether that be through budgeting, inventory management, costing recipe cards, labor, checklist, you name it. He is a master on restaurant systems, and he's making himself available to you. Fred Langley and Restaurant Systems Pro started as a consulting firm, and for over 16 years, they've been helping their clients increase their profit by 10% or more. What are you waiting for? Click the link below to join our Facebook group, Restaurant Unstoppable Network.
So you have this passion for business, money, accounting. What you just pointed out, by the way, is exactly why over the past 10 years I've started to get away from interviewing the James Beard and the Michelin star chefs in those types of restaurants, because they're so flash in the pan, over the top, designed to get the eye of the foodie, like the people who are writing about food, that their businesses are in shambles and they do not know how to run a profitable business. And I'm like, I've got to stop making an example of these people. As passionate and as talented as they are, it's like we need to stop this cycle of just going to open restaurants for the sake of I love the cook. Like it's like that's important. You need to have a passion for the thing, but you also need to be fiscally responsible.
It's a lot. It's a lot of moving pieces, and I feel like, the chefs and some of the most talented chefs, and you hear it. These Michelin chefs and these celebrity chefs go in and they try to reset a restaurant, and it just crumbles.
Right.
And there's so many. It's like a whole like ecosystem, and you have to kind of have the entire understanding to make it work. And I feel like many times it gets lost, and it's very different than what it used to be.
Right.
And I remember the way, I went, and so going back to what I started with, I was going to learn business, and one thing that I asked my brother and my dad is, hey, what are we missing in the family? What parts, if you can look back and see, like, what was one challenge that you guys wish you knew more? And it always came back to the accounting and how everything actually line itemed. And, they can build huge businesses, but if you don't fundamentally understand the roots of what everything is, it's really hard to dissect what the problem is.
Right. And that's what knowing the numbers does. It gives you a pulse on your business. It literally tells you the lifeline, like what's happening. Is it healthy or not? And then when you really drill down and follow the numbers, you know exactly where to look to fix the problem, which is even cooler. I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, because I think that's probably going to come out as you talk about like when you come on board, right? So you study accounting, you become a CPA, you work in corporate America for 3 years.
Yep. Deloitte and Touche.
Yep. So from 2010 to 2013, you were at the University of Southern California, Marshall School of Business, and then it wasn't until 2016 that you joined the family business. Is that correct? Like joined meaning like shifted gears to focus more on the business and less on corporate America.
Yes. Full time. But believe it or not, I was working dialogue since all through college.
Okay.
So I was
family business.
Yeah, family business. So it was actually pretty crazy, and I can say it now, but I would work corporate America. I was working at Deloitte, and I was doing like 50, 55 hours a week.
Okay.
And after that, I would still come into dialogue at like 8 or 9 p.m. and run payroll.
Oh, wow.
Pay all the accounts payable. Do all the cash.
To be young, right?
Yeah. The sales reports and all the taxes. And I would still run service Saturday and Sunday when we opened that up.
Okay.
So I was still really, really involved in everything since that time.
So between 2006, right, and 2016, where you're working part-time in the business, focusing on your career, what was the evolution for your parents like? How did the business change from 2007 to 2016 when you were just here part-time?
I think there was definitely a time where it was survival.
Okay.
I know right at the beginning, my brother had this idea of the direction. And at the time, like, we weren't open past 4 p.m. It was very, Sunset Strip wasn't the most safest place at night. Definitely wasn't, there wasn't foot traffic. And they were just open on the mornings. They weren't open on Sundays. They closed early on Saturday. I don't even think they were. Maybe they were open for a little bit on Saturday. We had
It's kind of funny because I think a lot of businesses went back to that more reduced hour to offset their labor costs and all that stuff after the pandemic. But it sounds like your parents started small and ramped up.
Yeah, and at the time when they took over, they only had 2 employees.
Oh wow!
There was only 2. There was like 1 shift in the morning, 1 shift in the afternoon, and my parents had to run the whole thing, and I'll never forget it. My parents worked very, very, very long days, and there was a lot of moving pieces, and they spent a lot of time, and my brother really, wherever he could and assist, and we changed the patio, we expanded it, trying to do that, get in that like foot traffic at the during the lunch rushes, and at the time we weren't even designed to do breakfast. First plan of attack was coffee.
Yeah. Do you remember their struggles, like their challenges as first-time cafe owners? You talked about the numbers, like the payroll and all that stuff. Wasn't their strength?
I think it was a mindset, and my brother was fortunate enough that he had his own businesses and he knew how to scale, but my parents were not, typical immigrant, kind of grind through and kind of save where they could, even to a point like counting napkins and seeing like, oh, where could we cut costs and what could we get? They made it happen. They would go to Costco, buy a muffin for $1.25, bring it to Dialogue, sell it for $2.25, and kind of, had that mindset of, how to just nurture their customers. My dad having that kind of that European mindset of, having relationships, and he loved taking care of their customers and really remembered people's names. But for the operation, I knew they really, really struggled just getting people in the door because it wasn't the most beautiful cafe. And it was trying to figure out what people liked. My dad would make handmade gelato, and he would give it to guests for free to try. Hey, try the gelato. I just made it. And we didn't really sell that much gelato.
Yeah. So when did things start to shift? to give the listeners an idea of where you are today, over I think somewhere around 1,300 reviews on Google with a 4.7 right review, which isn't easy to do in a place like West Hollywood, I'm assuming, right? To get raving reviews. That's a high expectation area, right? Your food is phenomenal. That has definitely evolved. The things people are saying about you are amazing. I think you have over 10,000 Instagram followers. Like, you have influence. Like, you're doing well. You've grown the business. So the picture you're painting right now isn't we resell Costco muffins. Okay, that's the reality of what you are today is not that. So, like, what point where was the tipping point?
So, one thing that has stayed true for us is the value that we bring to our guests.
Okay.
And that's that concept.
The value being the experience, the human experience, the service.
It's all encompassing. I think there needs to be a standard in your sourcing, the quality. And I will say, every single time that we have improved quality at Dialog, we have seen an increase in customers. If I can pinpoint it to a very specific detail. But there's this other side of that value that comes in where, you have these chefs who are like going and importing this very special oil or this vinegar, sourcing ingredients, but at the same time, they're charging a huge premium to getting that. And when you're trying to create recurring basis on your customers, is as much as you want to be focused on sourcing the quality, you have to bring value where people's like, wow, I am getting amazing food at a great price point where I can do this often. And, and people are becoming more aware. Right. There's between social media and all these TikToks and everybody's
aware of what?
Aware of the concept of quality.
Okay.
And sourcing ingredients and the execution of dishes, and there's so much more exposure to that I feel like people are becoming more aware of the quality standards.
Yeah, the consumer's more educated than ever before.
Oh,
there's so much information out there. Like, everyone's a foodie. Right?
Everybody's a foodie.
Yeah.
Everybody. So it's bringing that, and the great thing is people are appreciating more at the same time. Where, oh wow, like one thing that we do is, like, we have a farmer who delivers our greens every single day.
Right.
And we literally text him at night. He wakes up in the morning. Him and his team go in and cut all the gems and all of our greens and hand delivers them in boxes every day.
When did that start?
That specific farmer, we started relatively soon, but that concept of bringing in the farmer's market started when I really became involved with the food program at Dialog.
When did that start?
Ooh, I would say right after, probably my last year at Deloitte.
So 2015?
Probably.
Okay. So let's go back to 2015.
But the coffee program was even before that. And
Okay.
that was while I was still at Deloitte.
Got it. So let's go to Deloitte. Why shift from this cushy, corporate job where you're probably going to make six figures at some point? If you weren't already making six figures, I don't know. Like, close to it, I'm assuming? Yeah. So what was going on internally that you're like, screw this lifestyle, I'm going to go work in restaurants for the rest of my life?
So it was an interesting point for me. I went to, I got my master's in accounting, USC. Deloitte was very, very great to me. They sponsored me to work for them. They gave me the status, and rigorous training, a lot of mentoring, but I didn't feel there was a part of me that was missing.
What weren't you feeling? Complete?
Yeah.
What
I
do
feel
you
like
think was missing?
The work that we were doing was, I'm a very people oriented person, and when you're going into a company like that, I feel like there was a part of me that was missing. And I love creating experiences for people. I've always been that kind of, I love connecting with people and figuring out how they work, what motivates them. And I don't think I was getting that fulfillment. And while I was working part-time at Dialog, I was helping with, I would come out and, I'll never forget, we'd be giving people gelato, and they're like, oh, like, it'd be really cool if you make like an avocado gelato. And it's like, man, that's amazing. And you'd go back and you would learn and you would see how we would do it. And, next time that person would come in, it's like, hey, we did an avocado gelato. Granted, it was an interesting.
But it's the fact that you're listening and paying attention and giving people what they want, and showing that you're willing to put that effort in to give them what they ask for.
And that was it. And then that there was a fulfillment to that I feel like I never had.
Being seen, being valued in that moment, appreciated for the work you're doing to make somebody happy.
Yep. And that was it. And I was definitely missing that. And sometimes it would go wrong, and avocado gelato kind of was a little bit gross. But we did like one where we used mint from my dad's garden, and we would steep the mint in the dairy that we'd be using for the gelato, and it would be like a slight mintiness to like the vanilla, and it was amazing. So sometimes you do things that would be really fun, and that like satisfaction of having somebody come in and try that was a fulfillment that was missing.
Yeah.
And granted, my parents needed help. My dad he hurt his back really, really bad, and that kind of even pulled me even further.
Got it.
And that's kind of how that transition from Deloitte came, and the transition from Deloitte went into Dialog.
Right. It's interesting. I mean, in my journey as the host of Restaurant Unstoppable, I've become more and more interested in the human variable, what makes us tick, evolutionary psychology, and just like this idea of like studying where we came from and like how we evolved to be optimal before the agricultural revolution, and our lifestyle completely went from hunter-gatherer to stationary, sedentary, living like this agricultural lifestyle, right? And when you do that, like there's so much, we need to be seen by each other so badly and valued by each other so badly, and in a world that has scaled where we're producing products for people that will never see the end result of our work, the payoff, the payload of like, you see me, you value me, I'm doing a good job, like it's hollow, and it's so hard to show up for a job that's so transactional where there's no reward beyond a paycheck.
But I feel like this generations are changing, and they're becoming so much more in tune with that. But I'm, I've there are days where I struggle with it.
Right.
Being in the operations of a restaurant.
Well, it's hard work, but it's rewarding work if you're good at what you do. So one thing I'm missing before we start to talk about the evolution of Dialog, your brother, was he in the restaurant, or was he kind of like the breadwinner that was kind of like out there making it possible for the restaurant to continue on in the early days?
At the time, he was definitely involved on the day-to-day.
Okay.
He helped get everything organized. He actually helped my dad with the whole transaction of getting Dialog, and
financial support, or like
more of like the operational standpoint of getting things organized. And granted, my parents never had, they never ran a restaurant before.
Neither did your brother.
Yeah, I know. But it was one of those where he definitely like helped get things going. And
he had a business mind of starting businesses and scaling businesses. So he understood the significance of systems, processes, protocols, things like this.
And it was definitely one of those points where he would come and he would figure things out. And it got to a point where he built a lot of relationships with the customers at Dialog.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, he works with his business partner that he met at Dialog.
Oh, cool.
And that's
right. You mentioned that on the phone.
Yeah. So they're really into technology and the basis. And I'll never forget the day where he's like, hey, Todd, here you go. Yeah. You're going to have to do all of this. And I was like,
happen?
When?
Yeah.
It probably happened probably like mid-time, a year or two. I was definitely working at Deloitte.
Sorry.
Yeah, definitely.
Deloitte's like a pair of pants, isn't it? Deloitte.
But it was definitely like at that where he's like, hey, here you go. You're going to have to keep going, but don't worry. It's doing, I can see it.
Yeah.
I can see the path.
So you start to like get your, you really start to, from what I'm gathering, like you start to develop traction, your interest in the business with the coffee program. Take it to that point.
Definitely. That was where I fell in love with the hospitality. We definitely noticed that there was this hole in LA of specialty coffee at the time. There was a Stumptown just opened. There was Handsome Coffee Roasters, and there was this wave of coffee shops roasting their own beans that weren't dark, and bringing in green beans that were more specialty with greater flavor profiles that weren't, that followed after, and this was a really tough challenge, whereas my dad was an old school Italian coffee drinker.
Yeah.
And it was definitely darker. And then Starbucks had these huge, 24, 30 ounce, huge milk and espresso, but dark roasted flavor profiles in it. And, my brother's business partner loved coffee, definitely knew it. And we noticed that there was this hole in the market. And we saw a couple of coffee shops being really successful at it. And this was when they first started. And I said, hey, you know what? And then I started tasting coffees. I met friends.
So this is like the 2012, 2013. Is that when this is happening?
Definitely.
Got it.
Definitely. And I had a friend who worked for a guy who had a little roaster. And he's like, hey, would you be interested to, I can roast for you and we can taste it at Dialogue and we can kind of build these custom blends. And it was, that I started learning about more of the coffee bean and the flavor profiles, building out my palate. And then I got really into latte art and texturing. And I used to, go around and learn at different places. And there used to be, you don't see it that often anymore, but coffee throwdowns. Have you heard of these?
Like kind of like a bake-off?
Exactly. It was exactly that. And you would go to a foreign coffee shop and you go head to head with somebody, and it would be like a $5 or $10 buy-in, and you would go head to head, and there was a judge who would base your texture, the symmetry, the complexity of your actual art, and you would just go round by round and base off elimination, and whoever won would get $500 at the end of the night.
Cool.
So I did that.
Did you ever win?
Yeah.
How many times?
I would say 3 times.
What was your average? What were we batting? 300, 400, 500, 600?
It was definitely, it got harder. And you go around these go up against a couple of other ones, and they would come in with their own pitchers. And they would be waiting to go against you, and they would be practicing with water.
Yeah.
And it's oh my God, this is insane. But there was a couple of times that I took it all the way, and I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to go for it with fun. And when you win, you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. I won a free grinder once.
Cool. So you start developing this passion for coffee, and you're learning. When you said you were going and learning, were you learning by just tasting and watching, or were you going and saying, hey, can you teach me how to do that?
Yeah, so it was many, believe it or not, YouTube was great at the time. I used to watch latte art through YouTube, and definitely helped me with the execution of it. The texture I learned from friends, and definitely other baristas, and going and practicing. And I would spend hours at night pouring lattes.
It's just so cool how you're the byproduct of social media and this 2007. You got your parents buy this place and they open it, and that's when the smartphone comes out. That's when everybody's recording everything and sharing everything. And we talked about the palette of the consumer improving over time, but as that's happening, so isn't the restaurateur. The restaurant operators are saying, oh shit, this is what they're doing in New York, this is what they're doing in Miami, and I'm in Los Angeles, and vice versa. So like no matter where you are in the world, you can elevate your game. And it sounds like that's what was happening, is you were just constantly getting inspired and constantly improving over time.
And it was really challenging, because as much as there was this, 15 or 20% of your customers are like, oh my God, this tastes different, I like it. You would have customers that would come in and guests that come to Dialogue, and they're like, oh my God, what did you do to the coffee? I loved the coffee. And it was that transition of taking it from a darker to a lighter medium roast. And the one thing that I really, really battled was, not only did you were challenged by your guests, but I was also challenged by my parents. And my parents were definitely against the grain, like, hey, what are you doing? Why are you changing these things? Like, it works.
Well, there's something to be said about that. Like, there's something to be said about consistency in different players having different visions for the business, and people start pulling in the wrong direction. Did that ever hurt you guys, or like did eventually they say, okay, it's your business, like you're the visionary? Like, is that what changed?
It definitely took a long time, and the one thing that really changed is when my dad injured his back and he couldn't do.
When did that happen? 16?
It was like my second year working at Deloitte.
You were there for 3 years, 2013 to 16. So it sounds like
The end of
2015 going into 16 is when the switch started to happen.
That's when I came in full time and I started changing things. I'm like, hey, we're not gonna do this anymore. We gotta evolve. We gotta change.
Were the numbers saying that you should do that? You were probably closest to the numbers because you were doing the books, right?
Oh yeah, it was definitely it was definitely changing, and it was growing really quick, and I could definitely tell that my parents were struggling with motivating staff to keep up with the volume by still like instilling like old practices. And I'll never forget, I would interview people, hire them, and then I would have to go work. And during that time of me working at Deloitte, I'd get a text message, and I'd be in a company meeting, and they're like, hey, like, I can't work because like you're telling me to do this direction, and then like your dad's telling me not to. And it's like,
which one is it?
And it was very, and at the time I was like, oh my God. So, and I'm dealing with, high profile people at the company I was working at. And I created this really challenge that really almost like broke me at the time.
Oh, I can imagine. And I mean, what you're talking about is something that it happens a lot in our industry, where there's two people who are maybe partners, or there's the owner who is trying to become more of a silent owner, but they still want things to stay the way it was when they were running it. And then you start getting these different points of view, these different people, two owners, two leaders saying, do it this way, no, do it this way. And it just creates so much stress for the team because they don't know what the right way is. And
clarity creates burnout if you don't have enough clarity on the direction you're trying to go.
Clarity creates burnout?
If you don't have clarity on where what the direction is, then it definitely creates that staff gets really, and I've spent hours and hours interviewing, and it's like, okay, well, you know what we need? We need a chef. And we'd bring in a chef who's really talented, and an hour later I'll get a text message like the day I'm not there. It's like, yeah, I'm not doing this.
Oh man.
So there's been obstacles that my brother and I have, like, we scratch our head, and it's like, okay, maybe that's not gonna work. And we fell on our face, and there's been,
is it 10,000 hours or 10,000 iterations?
Oh, it's crazy. There's you spend so much time and you think something's gonna work, and I feel like everybody thinks that when they look at a company and they're like, oh my God, this thing is so successful. They don't realize how many times you like fall on your face, and you're just
10-year overnight success.
Yeah.
And that's about where it was. It took about 10 years for you guys until like 2017 when you're on full time. This is all you do for a year. Is it safe to say that's when things started to like really shift?
There was definitely that was definitely the time where I could really put my feet down, and I remember there was times where they're like, oh, we're not going to open Sundays. It's like, what? And okay, well, we're not gonna do it. If you want to come do it, do it. And
They being your mom
my
and
parents,
dad.
my parents
Okay.
didn't want to open on Sundays,
Yeah.
and we were talking about it. And my brother and I were like, "Yo, Sunday brunch, like there's no way we have to open." So I'll never forget. I had to open up, and I would do the open to close on every given Sunday. Still to this day, so I still do that.
Yeah.
But it was definitely. I remember the first Sunday we opened. It was like, I think we did like $215, and the entire day. And I was so discouraged, and I was so disappointed at it. And I was like,
Is
okay,
that a robo-coup going in the background right now?
that's actually our potato peeler in the back.
Potato peeler.
Yeah.
We're in a kitchen right now, so like,
There's not.
instead of just like ignoring the background noise, I'll give you guys play-by-play. We had an immersion blender going earlier. That is the potato peeler. You can hear it in the background right
That's
now.
right. We crank. Fun fact: we do like 500 pounds of potatoes a day,
Oh, crazy, man.
and
I'm definitely building up an appetite because I came by not long ago, and I was like, I'm just gonna get a smoothie and a coffee just to like check it out real quick. Then you were kind enough to send me some waffles, dude. They were delicious, by the way. Thank you so much. And I heard something about the burritos here being really good. Breakfast burrito. Hopefully you
Yes.
guys do breakfast all day.
yes, all day long, every
Sick.
single day.
I know what I'm getting.
Yes.
Anyway, I digress. So back to, can you pick up your train of thought before I pulled you off to talk about whatever that noise was?
Sunday brunch, and we did it, and it was $215. It was so discouraging, and it was really, really, really tough. And we just, I had to power through it. But it's very hard making these changes when I wasn't here all the full, full time. And I remember I had this conversation with my girlfriend at the time, and I said, "Hey, listen, like, this is definitely a point where we need to figure out where my future is." Obviously, she wasn't happy with me working, 55, 60 hours a week and then spending another like
Right.
15 to God knows how many hours here. There's no time for any relationship at the time. And I kind of said like, hey, Dialog's it's not making money. Things are going to get really tough. And, since up that time, I never took money from Dialog. It was one of those things where I just needed to help my parents. My dad struggled with his back. I needed to be there. It was like
How did you survive? Was it your girlfriend's income?
I was, I thank God I had savings from Dialog and, savings from Deloitte, and, my parents were here. We had food at any given time, and, it's things
It's
were
amazing what you really, how little you need.
Yeah. Oh my God. It's when you look back, I was like, how did I do that? But you make it happen. It was and there was definitely a time, and I'll never forget when I came into the family business, there was my brother's like, hey, here's the books, and you go, just, let me know if you have a question. I'll never forget. At the time I sent our accountant an invoice that he sent me back to him, and I was like, he's like, hey, why did you send back? And I was like, oh my God, like I'm just figuring it out. And he's like, I don't, wait, hold on, why did you send back the invoice? And I was like, hey, listen, I don't know,
Going through the motions.
Yeah, going through it. It was crazy at the time, and you look back and you laugh, but at the time, everything was a mess. And then I'll never, I look in the corner of the thing, and I saw these stacks of envelopes, and I was like, what the heck is this? And I look, and I was like, there's checks, and like a lot, and I open up the envelopes with checks in it. My dad's name is on it. I was like, the heck are these, like payroll checks? And I told my dad, I was like, Dad, what are these checks? And he goes, oh, well, you know what, like, things were tight, and we were like pushing the remodel, and we were buying like equipment that would break down. We were replacing stuff, and we had payroll and rent, and it's just, my paychecks weren't a thing, and it took time, and it took almost like a year before I told my dad, it's like, hey, listen, we're going to go ahead, and we're gonna process the payroll, and then we're gonna take one of your old checks and we're gonna deposit it. And then we started depositing 2 checks, and slowly over time we were able to get back. But there was definitely a long time of being extremely tight.
How long was that? From 2015 to?
Took years, and those checks.
I'm asking you to be vulnerable right now, and I realize that. But what I'm trying to do, just so you know where I'm coming from, there's a lot of people who are listening to this who are exactly where you are.
Yeah.
And where you are today is nowhere near where you were during that 2015 to call it 2019 period, right? Where you're really just evolving the business to what it is today. Is that safe to say? I'm kind of filling in the blanks right now, so feel free to correct me. I don't want to tell a false narrative.
No, that's completely right. And it took, these checks I found they were dated back from the year before. And my dad was sitting on his, he was just spending his savings.
Yeah.
And, 2015 all the way to 2017, there was like this struggle of like, hey, do we deposit an extra check from like God knows how long, or do we go ahead and buy this piece of equipment that would give the kitchen more space to put an extra ingredient in?
So these checks have your dad's name on it. I just want to make sure I understand. Is his name signed, like he's writing checks to people, or are they checks written to him?
No, it was the checks to him. It was just his very modest amount of pay and
owner's
pay. And honestly, like those checks were like calculated based off his expenses every month.
So those
for
are
our
checks
family.
written to him that he wasn't cashing, so he could put the money back into the business. He wasn't drawing on the business. He was putting that to operational expenses.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure we got that clear.
Yeah, definitely. So we would process the payroll, and he just would never deposit it. And the whole thing is cash flow. That there's so many elements to the business that you have to know, and thank God I went in and I understand the concept of cash flow and the margins and costs of everything.
So when did you start putting these cash flow disciplines in place? When did that start happening?
The second we could afford it.
Yeah.
Before it was like, we gotta pay this. Okay, you know what? Let's see. Hey, how long do we have for this due date on this? Okay, let's wait on that, and then let's try to build up enough cash flow. Hey, could we squeeze? Okay, can we do a payment plan on this one thing? And we would stretch this out, and then
focus first on paying off the liabilities, eliminate the debt, get right, and then once you pay off the debt, what I'm hearing from you is then that's when cash flow, where you can start allocating cash, and like once you're in the black, basically, right?
Definitely. And that's the one thing that was a real struggle is understanding what the cash flow should be as the business scaled, because as there's more layers, there's more things that you have to consider in your cash flow that could adjust it. And at the time it was survival, and that's the toughest thing, and just understand what you had to pay. And the one thing that we were really adamant about is that we always wanted a pair of vendors, especially everybody that we use were family owned small businesses that we'd order from, or if that we'd small, they were started up. So, and everything else we kind of had on payment plans, and as we became more in the black, then we were like, okay, you know what? We have to process payroll every 2 weeks. This is what our average payroll is, so we're going to have to make sure that we have this balance.
Allocate that cash.
Definitely. And then like sales taxes is a big obstacle, and definitely like as you become more profitable, there's this whole like, there's a lot of things that you have to account for, and there's all these taxes that you have to pay at the end of the year.
Yeah. That's not your money. And I think that's what people don't understand is like when you make $1, depending on what state you are in, 20% to 30% of that dollar does not belong to you. That is not your money. Put it away. Allocate cash.
What up, unstoppable restaurant owners and operators? We have to interrupt today's video to let you know that Restaurant Unstoppable and Restaurant Systems Pro, we're taking our relationship to the next level. Beginning in July of 2024, Fred Langley, CEO of Restaurant Systems Pro, is making himself available once a week in Restaurant Unstoppable Network to answer all of your restaurant systems questions, whether it's the profit margins. He will look at your P&L. Bring your P&L. He will take a look at that. He will dissect it. He will help you find your profit, whether that be through budgeting, inventory management, costing recipe cards, labor, checklists, you name it. He is a master of restaurant systems, and he's making himself available to you. Fred Langley and Restaurant Systems Pro started as a consulting firm, and for over 16 years, they've been helping their clients increase their profit by 10% or more. What are you waiting for? Click the link below to join our Facebook group, Restaurant Unstoppable Network.
That was definitely one of those things that I learned the hard way is, you don't understand how much time you actually put in. And for many times, I definitely felt like my family struggled with that concept of, hey, you know what, you are here, you are working, and it's just to get the ball rolling. It takes so much time. But as we created the system, I feel like it got a lot easier to kind of organize it this way. And, we were always really conscious about getting ahead with pioneering new, systems and different things that we were trying to bring on in terms of, equipment or things that would organize, or a potato peeler behind us.
Yeah. Well, and that helps with as the cash flow comes in, you're like, okay, we are cash flow heavy right now. Where can we spend this money? Or if you have profit, right, that you're putting aside, okay, if we use our profit and we buy this $5,000 potato peeler, we can shed $500 a month worth of labor expense or whatever. I'm making up random numbers right now. But that's how you start, but you first have to get cash flow positive and look at then when you're an accountant and you're looking at all the number, wow, our labor is so high. How can we invest in assets to bring our labor, i.e. automation and technology, our labor down? It becomes a game. It's a fun game.
And that's the stuff I've grown to love, is getting these labor, these different changes that can change the way you do things.
Yeah.
At Dialog specifically, I just went on 2 months ago, I spent hours learning about egg peelers and egg breakers.
I was just watching somebody behind you. I think you were calling her mom.
Mama.
Yeah. She was cracking eggs. We're talking about you. and
it's one of those where you go through this rabbit hole and it's like, oh, well, we break, this morning we broke 5,000 eggs.
Right.
And it's like getting one person to do that is a lot. And how do you...
I was watching him. You got to break the egg, right? That's a skill position. It sounds kind of silly, but then you're removing the yolk from the egg whites.
Yep.
And it was taking her about 4 or 5 seconds to do an egg. How many eggs?
5,000. We do.
What's 4 or 5 seconds times 5,000?
Insanity, the amount of time.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna, have you share mama's, salary or income, but you can. We're in California. I'm assuming
those are the potatoes dropping.
Oh, those are potatoes dropping. Right now. Yeah, but it adds up is the point. So you look and you're like, I can't afford a $5,000 egg breaker. How fast are you gonna make your money on that?
And those are the things where, and when you scale, that stuff becomes a huge issue. Now we have, it's called an egg centrifuge. I don't know if you saw them working on it, but it's this barrel right behind us. And it basically, you drop these, you can drop 30 or 60 eggs at a time, and it basically spins it. And
is the egg yolk more dense or less dense than the egg whites?
It's more dense. It's definitely a thicker.
Okay. But
one of those things where you drop the egg, it'll literally break all the eggs, and it'll take it up to the side, and it'll spin it dry.
Oh, cool.
And it's interesting with that. Not only are you saving the time of somebody manually breaking the eggs, but it actually can take 99% of the egg product, then breaking it by hand, and it only gets 95%.
Right.
And they're trying to break it so much.
Yeah, and it's a really exciting time too, because the technology, the automations are only getting better. So there's ways that if you really, but it all starts, to go back to the beginning, with cash flow management.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think from there it's costing, inventory management, purchasing, that's when you can really start to drill down.
Oh, and it's, and we have it. We have everything calculated. And the other part that really helps us is that I have been working on the tools, and one thing that I'm so blessed with is that we've been able to build such an amazing team.
I smell propane.
Nice.
Sorry. You getting that? I got electronics over here, so I'm not worried about it. Keep going. Sorry.
But it's getting systems and matrix that your team can use to make better decisions. I definitely smell a whole bunch of. There's so many.
There's a lot of flavors wafting.
Yeah.
Right now. It's. I'm doing my best to follow along.
But there's a lot of these, like, there's only so much you can expect from your team, without having any knowledge of any kind of information, and being able to, like, really break down. And one thing that I've noticed is there's so much data out there. There's you get so many. We used to do one of the things that we like brought on is like an email list, and we'd get it every time people would log into our Wi-Fi, and we had tens of thousands of emails that would just sit there. And me as an operator, you're trying to make sure everybody's working, and you're trying to get your managers held accountable. You're trying to get timesheets, and there's all this compliance stuff, and you're sitting on this huge list, and it's like, how do you take that information and get it to a system that can create that into like a piece of value to you, and there wasn't the technology behind it, and you create all these emails, but you would have to transfer it to another program that would hold it, and then you would have to create something and then have that, like, use that, but you wouldn't have any graphic designers.
Right.
So there's so many of these pieces that you're trying to figure out, and until you take the time and streamline everything into a simple process, you're wasting your time.
You used the word layers earlier. And I think that by that you're talking about there's like the frontline work that has to get done, right? Like cooking the food, right? Serving the food. Layer 1, right? Then the layer above that is like managing the people who do that. And it's just like you got to build all these layers. And then the layer building, and I think that's the secret, is the layer building never stops.
It doesn't.
Yeah, it's just it's increasing cash flow. So until you can build the next layer, until you can build the next layer, until you build the next layer, then as you're building the layers, you're building on the things that you didn't have time to do before. So like, oh, finally we have 30,000 emails. Like, let's start marketing. Let's start. And I think what gets people in trouble is that this world of marketing is so loud today.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, you got to prioritize marketing. And I'm like, marketing is important. Don't get me wrong. But if you send people to your business and you're too busy trying to tell the world how great you are, and if the reality is you're not great because you haven't built those layers, the foundation, then they're never going to come back, and you've lost that lead.
Yep. And we've been really focused on consistency in the product, and you're completely right. Is that you get all these places that you think are great, and it's just so trying to bring you in, and then you try it and you go and it's amazing the first time, and then you go back a second time and it's like a complete flop.
Right.
And it's such a scary part for
different person was working that day.
Yeah, and imagine I've been working on this single location dialogue for years. What was that? 14 years? Yeah.
Kind of going along, like, when was like the shift? Like, it sounds like your family was in first gear, like, I don't know what second gear would have been. I think maybe evolving the food offering, right? Third gear was you coming on more full time. Fourth gear was maybe you starting to really drill down into the numbers and building these layers like we're talking about, looking about, how can we be more efficient? How can we get better? What was like fifth gear? We're going to be in a 6th gear car, so eventually we'll get to 6th gear, but when did this really start to shift for you guys? Was it before the pandemic, after the pandemic?
I would say dialogue has grown for many, on every single gear. The more you gave it, the more you would get. And definitely coffee, then it went to the food. It was definitely the breakfast, and then I definitely we would find people who are very talented, who's very, very gifted, that would come in and kind of help us on it. And it was an interesting thing. We fell in love with maybe this is off tangent, but I think it's a very fun story. But it was there was this chocolate chip cookie at a coffee shop that we fell in love with, and my brother's like, hey, you got to find who created this chocolate chip cookie. And I went on this journey to find this person, Googling their name.
Crunchy or chewy?
But very chewy with a crispy rim on the outside.
Got it.
Amazing.
Keep going.
So very important questions, though.
Yeah.
This is very, very important. And I finally found this random Instagram based off of this link to an Instagram off of an online interview with this girl who created this, who came from like a French cuisine, and I literally sent her a message on, my team knows me as the person who DMs. I'm notorious for DMing people on Instagram saying like, hey, do you want to grab a coffee?
Yeah.
In a non-creepy way. And I did the exact same thing with her, and I said, hey, like, would you be interested to get a cup of coffee? I'm fascinated by your cookie.
Yeah.
And brought her on board, and she was the one who sourced me about farmers market. And I found out that she was helping with the baked goods at this coffee shop, but she comes from a very high-end French cuisine background.
Got it.
Grew in, and she taught me everything, and that's when I feel like the food went from being good to great, is when we were able to source that farmer's market and really, going to farmer's market, getting the herbs, and a lot of the inspiration for our dishes came from that. Her name's Naomi Shim. She's amazing. She came on board. She taught me how to bake. She taught me how to cook, and I taught her about coffee.
Nice.
And then now she has an amazing coffee shop, or cafe called Doubting Thomas.
Yeah. And what I love about this is knowing when you need help, being humble enough, not humble, but what's the word? I guess vulnerable enough to ask for help, and then trying to find a way to create a win-win situation. You help me with this, I help you with that. But it all starts with reaching out, finding the person who's better at it than you, getting vulnerable, saying you're better at this than me, and how can I help you, right? And when going further together.
And I'm really good at that. I love that. I'm always about growing and learning, and every time I meet somebody, either from our team, and having a talented team only makes you better, but you have to be comfortable for saying like, oh, I don't know how that's made, or I've never done that before, and letting them kind of show you, and that taking that food to the next level. We struggled with lunch before, and I'll never forget it. We would sit down, my brother and I, and his business partner, we would sit down, and we'd be talking, and at like 1 p.m. and we'd look around, and everybody would be eating like eggs, and it's like, man, this is like peak lunch hour, and no one's eating lunch here. They have a coffee, they have some eggs. There's definitely something that we need to change. And then that's when we did the lunch program, and that's when everything kind of pushed us a lot further.
What do you mean by that?
Where we started having like capacity issues and ticket time issues, because everything was great until we started doing.
When did that happen?
Pre-COVID.
Like 2018, 19, or like right around when COVID started.
Right around it.
Okay.
And that's when we started having where, we'd build an amazing bowl, but it would take 30 minutes. And then we'd realize, oh shoot, like the problems that we're dealing with are very different than what we were dealing with. We couldn't get people in. Now we have too many people coming in, and our dishes are taking too long. And
how'd you overcome that?
Scratching my head a lot.
Yeah.
And I love this where, and this is one of the tough things is you want to create something amazing, but there's also a time that it takes to be made. And, what are things that you would be willing to batch and what are willing to not batch? And it's this very fine line. And you go to these restaurants and you try and you're like, oh my God, it looks good, but doesn't it taste good? And it's, and it's like people being robotic. And it's when you're really busy is having the systems in place of checking it and not being robotic and feeling about what you're doing, but yet being conscious that, hey, the person coming in for lunch, they have 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So you literally have 25 minutes to get them to order, sit down, eat, and leave.
Right.
And nobody has time. Everybody's running behind for everything. So you had to keep that in mind. And we had to not compromise, but we had to find ways of being clever on how we batch things or do things. And a big thing for me was always identifying our bottlenecks into our flow. And I noticed that as we scaled, the bottlenecks became more and more, and it's the cracks. And as you'd fill it, then you would have another one.
Yeah, it would just flow over to the next point.
And it would just, and you're constantly trying to patch up these bottlenecks. And then, if there's ways that you can actually see like, oh, this is going to be a problem in the next 6 months, on how to get to that next
point. So pre-COVID, what was your footprint in terms of, like, right now we're sitting in your office/kitchen, second kitchen, because there's also a kitchen in Dialog, which is the building next door.
Yep.
So how long, when did you move into this space?
So this was something that happened during COVID.
Okay.
But when we had, at the time, we literally had a small seating.
Yeah.
We had, believe it or not, we had indoor seating.
Okay.
And this was pre-COVID, and we had about, I think, like 25 seats inside Dialog.
Wow. That's a small space.
It's a small, and it, again, it was one of those bottleneck things, and it's crazy. I remember I hired an architect to create a floor plan for Dialog, maximizing the seating while only allowing 6 inches of space between the tables.
Holy moly.
And we did this like,
I don't even think my thigh is 6 inches wide.
It was.
How would I get into one of your seats?
And it was crazy. Like, she's like, okay, we're gonna have to do benches here. We're gonna have to do benches here. We're gonna have tables. And it's like, and we did like a light remodel. We did a facelift of Dialog, and we did all this like this bench seating, and then COVID hit.
Well, I think COVID was probably a blessing in disguise for you guys, because you got all that patio seating overnight.
That was, there was a...
How many seats do you have total today? Ballpark.
If I had to guess, maybe just under 100.
How many did you have before the pandemic?
Oh my God, maybe like 30.
Yeah, so you more than doubled your volume.
Yeah, and it was interesting. Right before COVID, there was this concept of delivery that it was a sleeper. And I'll never forget when Postmates cold called me one day, and they said, everybody thinks of Postmates today, but they don't know where Postmates came from and how they started. I will never forget that. So they had this like janky kind of menu online based off of what they could pull from the online menus from like Yelp. They created this kind of menu. It didn't have all your dishes, but it had some. Didn't have any of your modifiers, and people can go on their website, order like, a breakfast sandwich, and they would literally call Dialog on the phone and say, "Hey, my name is Eric. I'm gonna order a simple breakfast muffin," and it was, okay, do you want bacon or sausage? And
It's such a clusterfuck.
Bacon. And it's like, okay, great. And this person would randomly come up with a Postmates credit card, and hey, I'm picking up for Eric. You go ahead. They would charge the Postmates credit card, and they would take the order, and then you would get a phone call from this other person who'd be like, hey, I got a breakfast muffin with bacon on it.
I ordered the sausage. 2 stars. 2 stars, you jerk.
and it was one of those. It's like, well, do you refund? And it was a disaster.
Oh my gosh.
But
yeah.
and I said, hey, stop doing this. You're destroying my customer. Customers are upset. And then they would call me and they said, hey, what if we put an iPad in your location and we would pay you at the end of the week and orders would come on an iPad? And at the time, I was like, okay, great. And what if this doesn't work? Oh, we'll just keep the iPad. I'm like, okay, great.
Yeah, cool, free iPad.
Yeah.
But now there's a donging noise every 5 seconds that's so annoying because it will dong until I do something about it.
Oh my God.
So we're making progress now. I think between like Marquee, there's another platform that was just recommended. I can't think what it's called, but it's like two-way authentication where like it like links directly to your POS and you can edit like the price if there's like a modification or something like that. So it's not just one way cash moving. You know
yeah, totally. It's I think there's another one called Otter.
Oh yeah.
And there's a handful of other products, but I feel like now that the POSs are getting, they're getting better at this.
Right. They're evolving for the new normal.
Yeah. But back in the day, and during COVID, when we stopped doing dine-in, I took the takeout station because it was so busy. We literally took it and put it on our patio. And we were giving away bags of orders over the railing.
That's crazy.
And you'd have these drivers that would come, but Postmates was like, we were getting 2-3 orders a day. And that was another pivoting point for me is, okay, well, there's no dine-in. Let's double down on our relationships. And I told Postmates, and at the time we had like 4 or 5 third-party delivery apps. And I said, hey, listen, like, nobody's coming in for dine-in. Let's go ahead and let's see how we can like make this relationship better and let's grow the volume. And takeout was a huge part of our business during COVID. And once things became a little bit more relaxed in terms of standards, granted, during COVID, nobody knew what they were doing. So I didn't know if, how long this was going to last, but I didn't care. I was just kind of going with the flow, and with takeout, we were just growing every single week, more deliveries. And then this whole al fresca concept came out, and what WeHo called it the out zone.
What's al fresca?
Al fresca is that temporary permitting process to put your seating on the sidewalks. It was an amazing thing.
Right.
There was this whole concept of hey, you know what, 6 feet distance and 6 foot distance between people. And I'll never forget, I literally had the city would call me and say like, hey, how do you feel about this? Like, is this possible? And we were trying to figure out what was the best way of doing these things. So there was this whole concept of, hey, what do you guys feel comfortable doing? And one beautiful thing of West Hollywood was they were like, hey, don't worry, we have your back. Let us know what you need, and we're going to support you, with the temporary outdoor seating. And we're fortunate with the way our cafes lined up on this little road is that we could do a really nice extended patio. And, that we're on like version number 18 at this point on how the seating should go. But it was definitely a very, very, it was great, but there was definitely a very hard struggle of takeout not slowing down and dine-in coming back.
Right. So when that dining came back, I was like, shit. We don't have talk about bottlenecks, right?
Oh my god.
So when you say your footprint is 4 to 5 times bigger, you're talking about al fresca. Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Al fresca.
Or al fresco. I think it's called al fresco. That al fresco or al fresca is related to the LA County.
Oh, okay.
And then WeHo specifically did the out zone.
So between that, in like doubling your footprint, basically your dine-in footprint, and having this new, basically ceilingless volume with like delivery, you're like, we can't handle the volume anymore, and that's when you start to expand your footprint to this building here, where you have a separate line.
That's right. And it was definitely like you're like, hey, how can I make things efficient? How can I change things? And it's the growing pain of volume. And one thing that kind of is challenges is are you really being efficient with your space with volume? And this is one obstacle that we definitely faced, with the past year what came in with the minimum wage increases. And that was a huge struggle because labor was getting more expensive. Our space was kind of getting smaller for the volume. So you had a lot of inefficiencies. And I definitely took time. So this is where the first idea of expansion came in, where we couldn't handle the volume, and the more volume that came in, the less you were basically becoming less efficient.
Yeah, because you're making more mistakes and you're bottlenecking, and that's when mistakes like happen, is when there's like the frustration, the chaos, right?
Yes.
So real quick, what is like the latest, like paint the picture of where you are today in terms of your technology and your tech stack.
So we, by the way, and if anybody hasn't done it, the consideration of new technology is vital to the continuation of operating a restaurant this day. Yeah. There's no way there's any restaurant that doesn't have at least, and when I first started, it was about creating a product and creating an excellent product, making it consistent. But now there's so much technology. I would say 20% of my time I just spend on technology strategy, and it is grown so much. And the one thing that I've noticed the hard way is a lot of people overpromise and they deliver the product. And you hear it a lot because everyone's like, oh, this can do this and this and this and this.
But you meaning the tech company?
Tech.
Well, yeah, they're selling. They're going to say whatever they need to get you to sign on that dotted line and lock you into a 5-year contract.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And and having you're already very limited on your labor. So adding another person just to implement this tech is really challenging, and we're very fortunate that we've grown a lot.
Who's overpromised?
Oh. There was
putting you on the spot here.
Oh my God. I don't.
I hear you. You don't want to talk poorly about companies.
Certain ones have come back and gone better, but there was I forget the name. Jesus, there was an AI voice recognition.
Slang.
I had Slang. It actually was.
I was gonna say Slang's the one I know of, but I hope they weren't bad because they were a past sponsor.
Yeah, no, Slang. I feel like Slang worked great.
Who
for
does
us.
your website?
Owner.com.
Okay, cool.
Owner.com is a new tech.
Yep. Past sponsor as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So Owner.com is it's like an all-encompassing, like kind of like a front end.
How long have you been with Owner?
I would say 5 months.
5 months. What were you with before Owner?
We had that all broken down, and we made our own website, and we had Squarespace. I think it's Squarespace. Yeah, something like that.
So,
and everything was broken down, and Owner kind of lumped it all together.
What do you mean broken down?
As in, we had like a individual, like we had ZenReach was our Wi-Fi, and then we had our own website, and then we had our button Squarespace, and then we'd have Chow Now that was part of that. But Chow Now's integration with and we had Square at the time, and Square wasn't. Square was one. I don't know if they're a sponsor or not, but
no.
Okay. Square was.
I mean, regardless of whether or not they're a sponsor, I want you to tell the truth. It's not my job to censor the content to protect my sponsor.
I love it.
That's not who I'm here to serve.
I love it. But Square was definitely one that, we have this concept, we have this technology for restaurants, and then you try and you're like, no, it's not. It's just like different colors. I was like, this isn't going to help us. But the integrations of having the third party like get pulled in, and
right.
And it's one thing that we really struggle with. And now I remember during COVID was as this takeout grew, you had all these broken sales categories. You had, dine in, then you had your takeout, then you had your third party, and then you would have 3 third parties, but nothing was able to pool all of your revenue together. So how could you manage your costs if you didn't even know where your money was coming from?
Right.
And I have, if you look at my computer, I have these crazy spreadsheets that like pulled from everybody's dashboard, and then I would literally like aggregate it myself every single month.
Right. It's super frustrating. I mean, for me, it's just like, listen, like the restaurant industry is responsible for so many ancillary industries that spin out of it, right? And the restaurants are always the ones that suffer the most. And the people who wouldn't even exist if not for the restaurant industry are just fucking sucking the life and pulling all this. I saw something online yesterday about people in New York who are going up and making all the reservations, right? And then what they'll do is they'll upsell the reservations for like an extra $500. Do you think the restaurant's seeing any of that? No way. And know what will happen if they don't sell that reservation? Then they'll just cancel it. And then the restaurant loses out on that fucking profit, dude. Like, Talk is a great tool for the record for reservations that I don't know. I think that there's different ways to circumnavigate that and to tokenize and to validate the reservation. But it's just one example of what happens when the restaurant industry is so heads down doing the restaurant stuff that technology evolves around it and just exploits the shit out of it. Yeah. It's super frustrating.
Yep. And I think it's being really conscious of that, and thank God we have, I have somebody on my team who just does technology strategy and does the implementation, and it's definitely evolved. But for the longest time, you couldn't get delivery orders sent to your kitchen correctly.
Yeah.
And
who's going to be the one to blame? The restaurant.
It's like,
back to owner.com though, because I want to find, so that's where you painted the picture of what you were working with, and how did you were shopping around, I'm assuming. So you looked at owner.com. What else did you look
at? Believe it or not, there weren't many options at the time when I looked at owner, and there's I would say maybe there's 3 main ones that do it.
So this is 6 months ago. You're probably looking at Pop Menu, Spot Hopper, owner.com,
Spot Hopper,
Bento Box, Batch Track.
There was we did look at Bento Box, now that you mention it, and there was another one that was it's based out of New York. Yellow in their logo. Lunchbox,
yep. I think that's one. They're online ordering, and I think they do website too.
Yeah, they do website, and they're very user.
So why owner.com?
Owner.com had an all-encompassing tech stack for the front end, and one thing that we've noticed that people struggle with is managing and communicating with your guest, especially with takeout, because there's nothing more annoying than putting in an order and it says, okay, your order's ready in 30 minutes. And what ends up happening, things slow down. They're able to get your order out in 10 minutes. And then your food sits on the rack for 20 minutes. And you're like, wait, why is my food cold? You said 30 minutes. I'm here 30 minutes. And it's just ongoing struggle. And one thing that's really great with it is that you can actually mark the order ready, and it will send a notification to your guest saying, hey, your food's actually ready early. Come pick it up.
Cool.
And it's all these small features, the bells and whistles for customer experience is really big. I know owner.com is really big on rewards. I'm not a crazy fan of having a rewards program. I think it throws off some of your matrix too much, well, for Dialog specifically. But they do have the website, and it's very simple how they've set it up. And also they have an app. They help you create the app, and by creating that app, you have a centralized location where your online orders, your takeouts, the app the orders that come through the app come into one thing. It's aggregated in a list. So when your team's working, it's just a full list of everything all together.
Yeah.
So it's very helpful having that, because by automating these things and simplifying what your team does, it makes it easier for them to focus on what's important.
Right.
And
Today,
that's like,
yeah, if you're building your own website and trying to manage your own website today, unless you're like, it's a hobby of yours and you enjoy it and like that's something that you're like, yeah, like this is cool, like outsource that shit, man. Like that's one of the things I think is a no-brainer. Like pro forma, like what am I gonna need? I'm gonna need a website. Like what's the, and it's you don't have to pay like $10,000 up front with owner.com too, which is the cool thing. Which is most of the models today. It's just like
it's insane.
It's a monthly fee.
And then some of the numbers they give you, you're like, wait, hold on, this is what it actually costs.
Yeah.
And there's so much compliance.
Right. So and it's constantly evolving, and all across all these different platforms, they're constantly evolving. So as the internet is changing, as the internet is evolving, and as like SEO is evolving, and all these things are constantly changing, they're staying on top of that. So all you got to do is run your restaurant, right?
And,
so it's powerful stuff.
And that's important. And funny story. Adam is the owner.
Adam Guild.
Yes, he's the CEO.
Past guest on the show.
Oh, really?
Yep.
So it's interesting. Adam used to come to Dialog with his family.
Oh, cool.
Years ago.
But he's up in San Francisco, isn't he?
So yeah, and he, I guess he was here, and
Palo Alto to be exact.
amazing. Yeah. He's actually really.
He's brilliant. He's really a smart dude.
He's very, very, and he and his thing is like, hey, I wanted to onboard Dialog to owner, and that was his thing. And when we finally met, I'm like, man, this is like you're solving a lot of the issues that a lot of operators have that don't have time to do.
Right. So from my understanding, the pros of owner.com is that they spend a lot of time figuring out the path of least resistance from finding your website to ordering food for takeout, and whether that be through the app or through the website. What I think what they're maybe not as well known for is giving the owner, the restaurant, freedom in what that online experience is. They kind of have their process, like this is how we do it. This is the best way to go from Google search to online order placed, and that's the way that we do it. If you're a restaurant that wants to put maybe more of the focus on, maybe you don't even do takeout. Maybe you're more of a experiential dine-in restaurant and you want to have more control over the website, then I think our current sponsor, Dash Track, would probably be a better option for you, because they are more about creating the custom experience, the user web experience.
Yep. Which is a large part as well.
Right. So it depends. Like there is no one-cut solution for all restaurants, and I want to make sure that's clear. If you have questions about which platform makes sense for you, feel free to reach out to me, Eric, at restaurantunstoppable.com. I'll help you make the right decision. Okay. What else in terms of tech stack?
So Toast, a POS system that it's been a juggernaut for us. It has a lot of modules and things like that we've been able to pull in. We are working with, we're in the process of getting Restaurant 365 in.
How long has that process been?
A very longer than I want. In all honesty, it was. We started implementing almost a year and 3 months.
Okay.
And we haven't fully implemented it yet, but we have invested quite a big amount of time.
What was the original appeal to Restaurant 365?
Reporting and understanding what your cost of goods sold are, and really line iteming. See, as an operator, your time is so limited. As an operator, your time is so limited. So any given day, you can only make about 20 to 30 decisions. So you have to be so careful on what those decisions are for your day, because you want to be the most impactful. Because there's, and I always joke, I could literally be here 24 hours a day and I could still be working. But it's like, what are the things that I should be investing my time on, and what are the tools that I can bring to my team so they can make better decisions, so they can be successful managers.
So Restaurant 365 would let you drill down line by line. Like we're talking general ledger. We're talking about all of your cost of goods, line by line, paper, celery, ground beef. Like you keep everything by the purchase of the product. So why is that beneficial in terms of what you're discussing right now?
Oh, it's huge, because when you're looking at it, and let's say, so the first thing is making sure that your revenue streams are centralized into a single, center of truth. And
What do you mean by center of truth?
Like where all of your sales are aggregated into one system. So Toast is that for us.
Got it.
Where it'll take our Uber data, our Postmates data, and our Chow Now, and our Dine In, and our Takeout, and it'll lump it all together, and then it's finding a system. And we looked at so many other ones at the time, and with R365, and every single person on your team has different metrics, right? Your chef is trying to keep the cost of goods sold on budget, and your GM is trying to get certain things under control, and labor's a big obstacle, and you have all these fixed costs, and you have your repairs and your expenses, and recruiting and turnover, and all of these matrix, and everybody has all these different matrix that they need. And with R365, you can centralize all of these things, where you can even create like custom reporting, where you can have a report specifically for your GM. You can have a report for your managers. You can have a report specifically for anybody on your team, and it would give them the insight that they need to make better decisions.
Yeah.
I don't know of any system that really does that. And it's interesting, this is where like that CPA and that like corporate America, like having that consulting background is. All these, I used to work with publicly traded companies, huge.
Yeah.
And they would have these huge systems that would hold all this information. Restaurants don't have that.
Right.
It is like,
unless you're a giant organization, you can afford to have like an Oracle, like creating all these systems in the back end or something like that. But yeah,
huge, like and those are so expensive.
Right.
So and it's not like only one piece. You got to buy like the system, the devices. You have to have the cloud base. You have to have them all pulling together, and there's all these modules that you need to add to it.
Yeah. The only other system I know that is as robust with the general ledger, POS, general ledger, labor management, inventory management, budgeting, purchasing, checklist, training, all those things under one roof that's fully integrated, that pushes to the general ledger, is Restaurant Systems Pro. And Restaurant 365, past sponsor, great company. Restaurant Systems Pro is probably like the industry is sleeping on this company. I think they don't have the same budget as Restaurant 365, so it's a matter of getting like awareness out there, and they're also changing and growing like crazy. If you are shopping Restaurant 365, great company. All I'm saying is also check out Restaurant Systems Pro, because they are making waves. And from what I understand, the background of Restaurant 365, accountants, built by accountants through the lens of accountants. Restaurant Systems Pro, built by restaurant owners who became consultants who are seeing it through the lens of restaurant operations. So I think that I've heard both of these platforms, just for the record, are hard to integrate, because you're literally gutting out your business and starting from scratch with brand new systems and processes. I will say I have spent a month and a half in the office at Restaurant Systems Pro, seeing how much these people care, and being a fly on the wall, and seeing the level of customer service that's evolved in the community that's evolved. And I'm saying, if you're shopping Restaurant Systems or 365, also check out Restaurant Systems Pro. Only you can decide which one's best for you. But I've been very impressed by Restaurant Systems Pro.
I love that, and I think that's actually a very important point, because at the end of the day, you're the one paying for the software. Right. And the longer it takes to implement, the longer it takes for you to understand the numbers. And there's a lot of care. And we're a large team, and I have somebody who literally just implements our tech. Yeah. And he has struggled to get
What was the struggle specifically that he's related to you? Communicated to you?
As much as I'm a CPA, I was a CPA, and he is a technology. All he does is he's very talented on implementing tech, um, there's this. It takes it down to such a level that unless you have a full-time accountant, a full-time tech person, a full-time accounts payable person, and you're able to really implement it, it gets really, really challenging because it goes to such a fine detail. And the other thing is a lot of the vendors that you use don't have complementing systems to what you're trying to accomplish.
So what vendors are where's their conflict between Restaurant System or Restaurant 365 and your vendors?
Yeah, well, just for accounts payable, there are some that are large and that make it easy. It was easy. You have like the Cisco's or the US Foods that have like a very robust system. And they have a lot of that back end to kind of implement the connection, the bridge between the way they invoice you and the way your system recognizes the invoices and takes and translates it. Okay, well, how many pounds, how many grams, how many count of, cilantro goes into R365, and then how that turns into a recipe so it can be part of your recipe. But there's also like your produce company that's a husband and wife that
you're buying from the farmers market every week.
And then the farmers market, and how do you companies that have like that their invoices don't translate correctly, or that don't have a complementing system, and it gets really challenging. So I have my tech person on my team going in and building these custom templates that are extremely complicated to just getting this thing implemented.
I think where restaurant owners go wrong with Restaurant Systems Pro or Restaurant 365, this enterprise solution is what I like to call them, is that it's a lot of work to get it off the ground.
Yeah.
And I think you really have to be at that point where you've built the layers.
Yeah.
Where like your business no longer really needs you. And then the next layer you're building is implementing an enterprise solution. And then once you've figured it out, or once you've delegated or hired the person to figure it out, and then you've built systems around that system, then it's going to take a lot of focus until you develop the neural pathways and the habits to manage that. Is what I've understood.
And you need somebody. You need full-time people.
Right.
Just to we call it like Dialog HQ. But we literally have 2-3 people who are working on this full time now to get this thing off and running. Because, as we spoke about before, we have an expansion going on with 2 new locations.
Yeah.
And we're definitely, one of those locations is going to be a commissary as well for us. And that's one thing, without having these modules to be able to do recipe transferred from one location to another, it's going to be really, really hard to keep track.
Yeah.
Also, with this whole concept of the commissary coming out, with our expansion, it's one of those where, we're trying to figure out ways to even be more efficient on more than just a single location level. And this is something that I have been thinking about for a while, but it's obviously we're going to have a couple of obstacles when it comes to that, but I'm excited to kind of see where this goes.
Well, I do know Restaurant 365 purchased Compete, and Compete was the best option for commissaries on the road. And I think the whole reason why they bought Compete was because they recognized that Compete beat them on commissary, and they wanted the technology.
Oh, is that the
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So they mentioned that they have a commissary module component to it.
It was Compete.
Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah, man. It's cool when you've been doing this for 10 years and you start to see the evolution of the companies and how they get absorbed by other companies.
That's crazy. And I feel like just knowing that there's so much good and there's not a good way of extracting this information, because like you said, everybody's sales and everybody's trying to sell you stuff, but having that like, oh no, I know that company before it got sucked in, and I remember, okay, well, do they still do this or they still doing that? I wish there was more insight on that.
Dude, you just
everybody
explained
has
my
to watch
future
these.
purpose.
Oh my god.
So right now we're in the process of building out Restaurant Stoppable Network, and it's been kind of quiet. We've been talking about like iterations, like any restaurant, you try something, oh shit, that didn't work. You try something new, well, I didn't consider this. And then with every new attempt, there's a new iteration, a new form. And what we're focusing on right now with Restaurant Stoppable is going through our backlog and linking and looking for all the different types of product or service has been mentioned, and like trying to organize it on the back end. So like if you're interested in Restaurant 365 or Restaurant Systems Pro, you can listen to every interview where there's been a testimonial over the past 10 years of that product or service. And really what we're trying to do, I mean, I'm not here to tell you one product is better than another. Like any restaurant, there's pros and cons to each. There's strengths and weaknesses to each.
Right.
And there's no two restaurants that are exactly the same. So, right. I mean, if you're a quick service restaurant, or you're trying to up your delivery game or your takeout game, owner.com is an awesome solution. If you are a fine dining, all in-house, you don't give a shit about SE, like you're more about creating, you're trying to get your high touch, high experience from your restaurant to your digital presence, then DashTrack might be a better option for you, you know? So like, who am I to say?
I wish there was a better network to figure these things out.
It's called Restaurant Stoppable Network, bro.
I love it.
We're building it.
But you know, and this is the struggle. The biggest struggle is that like the only tech that I find out about is through other restaurant operators that I met at conferences, or you know, a lot of times it's just like cold calling, and you have no concept of what it is. And I think what you're doing is like,
thank you.
It's God's work for
Thanks, dude. And I'm gonna make one more point. One of the reasons why I love Restaurant Systems Pro is because I told them that if Restaurant 365 is being discussed on the show, I'm not editing that shit out.
Oh my god.
You know, like it's not my job. And they're like 100%. And so they're also, they understand what I'm trying to create, and they're supporting it. So, and I've had a lot of sponsors, I won't say which sponsors in the past, that are like, we won't promote you, or we won't work with you if one of our competitors are promoting you. And it's just like, well, I'm not going to continue to be a part of the problems with society. So like, I'll find somebody else. Yeah. And one of the reasons why we're trying to grow Restaurant Stoppable Network is because I need another form of income so I don't sell out to my sponsors. And I'm at a point right now where my sponsors are great, and but the way I see things going, that if it's becoming a more pay to play world that we live in, and I just don't want to contribute to that. So anyway, back to your story.
It's a lot.
Yeah, but this was a good opportunity to say, oh, you know, there's that thing that you wish exists. We're building it. Yeah. So join Restaurant Stoppable Network if you want to support this mission. If you're listening to this, thank you very much. And
I love that.
Past guests get lifetime access, for the record.
Wow.
Cool, man. What haven't we discussed up to this point? We're gonna start wrapping up. Like, take us to something that you were hoping would come out of today's conversation, or maybe where are you going? Like, what's the vision of Dialog?
Vision. So this is vision is, you know, some people say it's very clear, the vision that they're from day one. I feel like Dialog's evolution has made the vision. It's also evolved with it, and I think what we're trying to grow into, we're very excited about. But we believe that the concept of bringing value to the customer and having that still hitting all the boxes, where the service is great, having, you know, high quality food, I think there's a lot more to grow, and we want to make it into something that's beyond just West Hollywood. We really want to grow our footprint all to LA, and we want to really make a difference on what people see as a fast casual concept. You know, from a staffing standpoint, I feel like company culture, restaurants have such a bad rep of company culture, and I think it sucks because, you know, you hear it so many times. People leave the service industry because it's a grind. And we're really, really trying to change that. And I feel like everybody's going towards that direction.
Has that been a struggle?
100%.
What have you started doing differently to get further in the direction of where you want to go in terms of company culture?
There's many things, and having the ability of having more flexibility. Many times, I have a wife and I have a 3-year-old son, and managing that while working in hospitality is always a struggle, and really having it where people have the flexibility, and technology has actually helped in being able to get coverage a lot easier.
Yeah. What are you leveraging for that?
We use Homebase.
So you're not using Restaurant 365's labor management?
No. And I always joke with Homebase, and they laugh at it every time. Every time I've tried to replace Homebase, it's always come on top. And it's very, very powerful from a scheduling standpoint, and it's very user-friendly. And every time I call, the people on the other side of the phone are really, really good at assisting and really ironing out the problems.
Got it. So you're trying to give more work-life balance to your staff, and you're leveraging technology to do that.
Yep. And I think it's important. And it's important. I think it's not sustainable. And, there's a give and take. And people can look at it in two different ways. Like, there's articles written that West Hollywood is the most challenging city to have a business. And I think it was like LA Times or something.
California is a challenging place to have.
Yeah. So there's California.
So much red tape.
It's California, and then West Hollywood is actually the highest minimum wage in the U.S.
Wow.
1908, and an insane amount of compliance with a whole bunch of, they definitely they say that they are like the pioneers of creating a work-life kind of, making things as best as possible. There's an insane amount of paid sick time. A lot more than what I think, if I'm not mistaken, there's like 40 hours of paid sick time for Los Angeles, and then we actually do 96 hours. So
it's those bougie Hollywood bastards raising the bar and life expectations. It's quality of life.
It's a lot, and it's like, it's crazy when you start seeing these things, and nobody really thinks about these until like the systems are actually in place. And you realize how much it adds to our.
I think this is great that he's cutting. I wanted to capture that in the middle of the interview.
Welcome to the kitchen.
That's great.
So it's
lots of distractions today. This is a trap for somebody with ADD.
So there's many things that we were trying to do, and I definitely think it makes such a more. It's like, and it's, you're nurturing a team. It's like, hey, you're sick. Okay, well, you know what? It's totally fine. Go home. Take the time to rest. Or at the same time, if you need assistance with something, we're more than happy to kind of make sure it. And I've always been a big believer. If you're not happy, at Dialog, please let me know. And really, no hard feelings. I never want you to show up to work and not be happy with what you're doing. And it's important that you really stay true to that. And I'll never take it personally, and I understand if it doesn't work for you, then it doesn't work.
Yeah, dude, I've really enjoyed today's conversation. Any other thoughts that you just need to get out before I start to wrap it up?
No, I think we had a great. We covered a lot.
It goes by fast. 2 hours.
I can't believe it.
2 hours. I'm like, trust me, it goes by fast. I think that at the end of the day too, we're hardwired to have long, meaningful conversations. And the world is telling us that we need to fit every conversation into 30 seconds or less, or 60 seconds or less. We're not hardwired for that. That only benefits one entity, and that's the marketing companies out there who are trying to fit as many impressions as possible into as much time as possible, so they can get more data touch points on you, and they can put more ads in front of you. That's what it comes down to. And it's weird how fast 2 hours goes when you're having a meaningful conversation.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah,
it's wow.
Yeah, man. So let's wrap it up. What is one thing about your business, a value, a process, a system that makes you truly unstoppable?
I feel that the drive of your team and nurturing that makes you unstoppable.
How do you nurture the drive of your team?
The openness and the vulnerability of having a team that can definitely push you further. And my team holds me accountable, and it definitely pushes you to the next level.
The mission statement is to change the world by inspiring, empowering, and transforming the restaurant industry. So if we're going to change the industry, how have you and how will restaurant owners have to evolve and get better and change as we go into the future?
I think you have to be able to not be okay with what the standard is and constantly pioneer and push things to the limit. And especially when people say that it's not possible, to hold yourself accountable and really push when you think things need to be changed.
Got it. Awesome answer. Okay, this is the last question.
Uh-oh.
If you got the news, you'd be leaving this world tomorrow. All the memories of you, your work, and your restaurants would be lost with your departure, with the exception of 3 pieces of wisdom you could leave behind for the good of humanity, your legacy. What would those 3 pieces of wisdom be?
Well, first would definitely be life is short. Make sure that you do what makes you happy.
1.
Always be positive, whatever the case, because your outcome will always be better that way.
It's a choice.
It's a choice.
3.
Live in the present.
Awesome.
I feel like people forget.
Yeah, man, this has been a lot of fun, man. Thank you so much. Thank you, Andrew Simmons, for calling you out. I'm really happy he did this.
Thank you, Andrew.
An awesome conversation. Who do you respect and admire in the industry? Who's doing it right? Who's running a profitable restaurant? Who's taking care of their employees? Who's challenging the status quo? Who do you think I need to make an example of? Call them out.
I have a very dear friend who's definitely been with me for a very long time. He comes from a very different background. He comes from the coffee world.
Okay.
But he definitely is amazing. His name's Leaf, and he's the owner of Stereoscope Coffee. And you want to talk about company culture and what he's done with his team.
Do they sell tea by any chance?
They do.
I would feel like you'd have to if your name's Leaf.
Yeah,
You know?
I love it. And I asked him, I was like, when I first met him, I was like, is your name actually Leaf? Like, it's funny you sell coffee and it's like, what, Leaf?
Well, his name's not Bean.
Yeah.
If it was Leaf Bean, because that's the last name, that'd be really impressive.
But he's definitely like, man, he's one of my friends that definitely challenges me to really be better. And he definitely puts his staff and his, the way he runs, the shops and the way he's running the future of his shops is definitely different. And one of his coffee shops just started doing food. and he's like, man, I don't know how you do this all the time.
Hey, well, he helped you. Now the reciprocation, right?
Yeah.
Of like, we'll show you how.
Definitely.
This has been a lot of fun, man. How can we connect with you? If we really enjoyed today's conversation, maybe we want to reach out. Maybe we want to come work for you. What's the best way to connect?
So I'm always available. My email is todd@dialogcafe.la. And anything else that we can be helpful, info@Dialog Cafe is definitely puts you in the right place with the right people. And I'm always here. I love to be at Dialog. I'm always walking the floor with my team. And, I DM everybody on Instagram.
No social handles?
So you can definitely DM Dialog, and I'm always here. I love this stuff. I love what I do. I'm very fortunate that I'm able to do it this way.
Awesome. And if you're listening to this on iTunes or Spotify, all the major players, their show notes, just scroll down to the bottom of the show notes. We'll have contact information right there, as well as links back to any tools or services recommended on the show. We will have affiliate links in those tools or services. So if you want to support this mission to inspire, empower, and transform the industry, please use our links. It goes a long way. And feel free to reach out to me directly, Eric at Restaurant Unstoppable as well. Cool, man. This is where I say thank you so much for taking the time to share your story, your knowledge, your values, your perspective, your mentorship. There is no questioning. You are unstoppable.
Thank you.
Cheers.